Okay, hi everybody. Alex Jarett again with Technology Executives Club, and I'm really happy to talk to Patrick Rafferty. Hi, Pat.
Hey, how's it going, Alex?
Great. Pat is one of our new board of advisors and mentor and part of the mentoring program. And so we thought we'd put together a few minutes just chatting about Pat's background and or areas he'd like to help people with. So, Pat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm in Vegas and working in Vegas, and excited to talk with you about great things that you are doing, and we're going to do together.
Yeah, we're going to do together. Yeah, everybody. So great. Well, we appreciate it. Okay, for those of you who don't know, right now, Patrick is the delivery lead over at Bank of Montreal. And man, you got a pretty interesting career. I mean, right now, you're the delivery lead full time. You've been doing that for a little bit now. But what does that actually mean? I mean, you told me the other day you had a huge budget, a lot of people working with you.
Yeah,
In these big institutions, these are pretty big jobs, right?
yeah. The delivery lead title is kind of fairly new creation,
Yeah.
and I look at it as kind of a mix between a service delivery manager and a business relationship manager for IT.
Uh,
So, so where I fit is I always say to people, I'm the one that'll make your technology work, whereas everyone working for me is part of that, but I'm going to make sure that what we deliver is what we promise. And
yeah.
so it's kind of a mix of like my team right now, we've got 7 dedicated PMs just on this project, plus 10 or 15 analysts, plus 40 QA, plus 50 you know 40 or 50 testers and another 50, 100 other managers and
Mhm.
various business people partially allocated. So on this project, I'm working on the Bank of the West acquisition and integration program at BMO. So we've just completed that purchase, and my part of that program is the deposits and debit cards conversion and integration. It varies in size, but I look at this as the role that's kind of the tie between your PM, your BA, your delivery. So it's generally a fairly senior role.
Right. And before that, you were director, senior delivery lead over at Kin and Carta, which used to be Solstice, a great consulting company. I know the folks that started that. And before that, this is when I met you, you were vice president, chief of staff, IT risk manager, senior program manager over at Societe Generale Corporate Investment Bank, another large investment bank and banking institution. You had a lot of people at that company. You told me, I think, over a couple.
We have about 800 in the team that I was chief of staff
Yeah.
for. So
Yeah. So you did that. And before that, you were senior product manager of Presbyterian Healthcare Serve. The list goes on and on. So what I'm telling everybody here, Pat is one of those guys, I'm just going to say he's extremely smart and he knows how to get stuff done. You've definitely fit the profile of someone who's really achieved great success early on in your career in these bigger companies, which is not an easy task to do.
and it's funny, and I haven't done it the normal way. I think Alex, I started my undergrad's in accounting, and so I was in corporate accounting roles, but I was always that guy, kind of like the liaison or the finance and IT, and I
Yeah.
didn't actually jump fully over until I went and did my master's at Columbia in New York City. And I went through that whole financial crisis, and I watched myself working 14, 16 hours a day, because every day it was like our major customers were collapsing, and we were having to worked on some big bond deals and multiple acquisitions there from the finance perspective. And I just watched my CFO every night. I just said to myself, gosh, I never want that job. No offense to any of the CFOs on the
Yeah.
and
That had to be a rough time for that whole community. I mean, impossible time.
oh, it was incredible. And and of course I had just come from, so I've always been very interested in like how the business really works. So like
Yeah.
I often say this, and we talked about this before, but like it doesn't matter what industry you're in, everyone has the same problems. So if you can solve those, you can usually find your path somewhere. And so I got more and more interested with the technology side and how good technology supports good business process. It shouldn't be one or the other. And I think like that's where, again, when I look at how I do things differently, I often ruffle feathers because I push for the right answer, which sometimes for my IT colleagues is they want the shiny new toy to play with, the new software or whatever. And I say that doesn't make any sense. But on the flip side, I'll push my business people to say, this makes sense for you, even though it's going to be painful. And so finding that ability to be like the internal salesperson for IT, but also to understand like what's really happening with the business and where our risks are. And those are like the fun puzzles. So for me as like a total nerd, and I'll just admit it, it's that being, solving those puzzles. So I feel like the financial background at the beginning really helped with that, because when we look at technologists, I think unfairly many get accused of having no personality. But oftentimes fairly, we get accused of not understanding business. And so, I think that's where.
But let's get back to your background. We talked before about 3 or 4 areas. If you want, I'll just read them to you. You can talk about each one.
Yeah.
Organizing your technology-based career for success, finding solutions to impossible problems, how to fix projects in crisis and make them work, and selling the value of technology within an organization. Every one of those could be a masterclass.
Well, it's really a finesse game, because there's a certain kind of gut instinct. I think, for whatever reason, my mom thought I was great. And so I have this incredible self-belief that there is no
That's great.
way that
I'm going to take some of that.
I'm going to take some of that. Exactly.
Go ahead.
And there really is, you go back to like the Kobayashi Maru, the no-win scenario. I don't believe in no-win scenarios. And
what,
really
is this from Star Trek? Is this the Captain Kirk thing?
I really don't believe in no-win scenarios. And so, over the years, even going back, I remember my first role. I was working full-time during college at a law firm. They decided to put a new IT system in, and the accountant, it was one of these places where you had one bookkeeper and one IT guy, and both of them weren't doing anything but all but stealing their paychecks every week. And they both quit at the same time. And so we're in the middle of the system implementation. I'm 19 years old. I don't know jack. And I somehow, working with a couple other interns and the full-time folks, managed to figure it out. We got the thing implemented, got all the books reconciled, some accounts that hadn't been reconciled in 5 years. And I just sat there, and I'm sitting to myself, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to find a way. And then in a more recent context, I think that like indomitable will and self-belief then allows, to, instead of, I never see that wall that everybody's saying you can't be done. And I'm willing to go and search out either within the organization or technology solutions or budgetary solutions or whatever to find a path to good. And there's a number of strategies to do that. And honestly, that'd be something that we should do like a workshop on sometime, Alex. But
it'd be fun.
It's kind of become a gut feeling. But a lot of the kids that I've mentored, some of them, successful in their own right now, have the ability. They just need someone who's gonna stand behind them and say, please go screw it up, just not so bad we can't fix it. So that's another one of my rules: don't break anything you can't fix. And so, and that goes into, I think, that second point, but around, fixing broken projects. And, when I think about it, it's a similar skill sets, but I think to fix a broken project, you have to be able to take that risk to know that nobody expects you to succeed. And so I think to be successful at it, you really have to want to fix things for the right reasons. And I can't tell you how many times I've been handed something that was a year late and $5 million over budget and turned it around, and those are the moments where you see what you're made of too, I think.
I mean, that's fascinating. Just to be able to share some of those stories would be great, but also to help people as they go through their challenges, would be incredible, because I do think that mindset is a big deal. A lot of IT executives still today, is I'm back office, I'm IT operations, and whatever the business wants to do. Of course, it is all about the business, but the thing that shifted is that technology is a huge part of the business. It's how the business is creating values. Going back to your enterprise architecture, it's how we're creating values for the customer. The other side is I saw, we did a project management event years and years ago. God, it must have been 15 years ago. And there was forget the fellow's name, but he was a VP somewhere. And what I liked about him was his mindset. He would say pretty much whenever all the different executives would come, he worked for a big company, come down and say, we got to do this, we got to do this, and we got to do this. And he was PMO, had a PMO.
Mhm.
And he would say, okay, what are we going to cut? But he was strong enough to stand up to everybody and say, I'm not going to tell you times that we can't do, and I'm not going to tell you staffing levels that we can't do. But as much as you want it to be true, I'm going to tell you the truth. And he had a great career doing that. What's your comment on that?
One of my great boss that I worked that brought me to Wall Street was this guy, Tom, and he used to always say, bad news sells better early. And it's something we should really take to heart, because I've never met a senior executive, and I literally used to prepare board packs when I was on the accounting side, and I have reported to CIO, like global heads, level people. And if you ask somebody, if you're up against a wall for something, that executive would always prefer you to say, I don't know, but here's how I'm going to find out. Let me get back to you by Friday.
Mm-hmm.
When you come back, you better come back on time. You can't keep saying, well, no, I didn't have time this week. I'll come back to you next week.
Yeah.
But as long as you tell an executive, here, this is why I don't know, and I'm going to find out, and here's what I'm doing to find out.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when I can give you that answer. They will always say, okay, then I'm going to fight you over it. And it took me until I was like 30 to figure that out, because I was like totally, yes. And then I'd go like turn my head around, and then, I'd ultimately find the answer, but I'd be late. So, it might be 2 or 3 or 4 days, or they'd have to chase me. And that was the other, kind of like great lesson I learned. Never let like a managing director or C-level executive chase you. So if you say you're going to do something, or they ask you for something, you tell them when you're going to have it done, and you get it done by then. And even if you can get like a grace period once, usually. So I find if 1 in 5 things or 1 in 10 things, I have to come back and say, hey, this came up because you asked for X, or they ask you for something else while you're working on these 5 things. You just say, I've got these other things I'm doing for you. Do you mind if I push one of them back? And just be honest. Like, this is me. Yeah. A lot of times you're so afraid, especially in like your 20s, and you're just terrified. You're like, well, what if I tell them and they yell at me or something? So what if they yell at you?
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who's a CFO, and we talk a few times, and he said it took him a while, but he sort of had to learn how to tell the bad news, and it was really his job to do that. Was to basically say, look, here's the numbers. You need to fix this. If you don't fix this, here's what's going to happen, right? And of course, the sales guys would say, oh, don't worry about it. We got a big pipe and everything. And he would say, great. But based upon today's numbers, it needs to get fixed, but he learned how to say things in a really diplomatic way. So it was non-confrontational. Nobody was at fault. It was just like, here's the math, and that's all I'm trying to share with you. That's how
facts. You can't, like if we just focus on facts, and that's the other thing, because I think like it's so easy to get caught up in well, so-and-so said they want it by the state. Well, if it can't be done by that date, agonizing over it. But if you come back and say, hey, here's what we can do, or a lot of times what I've done is when resources were tight, usually when you've got big business combination type activities, or, right now, like this acquisition is a massive part for BMO, what we're up to. Everybody's overworked. So if somebody asks me for a change to scope or whatever, a lot of times what they're asking for makes sense. Like, it's not a bad idea. So I have to, before I say no, and the default answer is like, no, you need a change request and we're going to bury you in paperwork. And if that's the default answer, that is not going to make anybody happy. So instead, I'm going to come back and go to my partners and say, okay, so I know based on the calendar that in April, things are a little slower. Can you fit this in? This is 2 weeks of work in April. and just kind of like create that solution before you ask the question where you're going to get the no. And it's the same thing. There's a whole lot of ways to say no without saying no.
Yeah.
And I think like that's where to kind of lead into the
mentoring.
Yeah, the mentoring.
I'm glad. Yeah.
Yeah, I really got into that the last few years, and I think like that's really one of the things I want to do, because while I may someday take a C-level role, I'm pretty happy being in like a senior role like this, that maybe.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I've really focused on mentoring, and I ran our junior analyst program at SG for like 2017 to 2020 for technology and operations, in addition to the rest of my job. And one of the things I've done with the local high school here in New Mexico, where I'm at, and with other groups of people, young people, is talk them through the stages of their development. And so, you have your kind of your I don't know anything right out of college phase of trying to figure out what you're good at. There's the getting really good at what you're good at and starting to learn how to lead.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of leading and mentoring. And so I feel like at that arc of your career where you gradually develop knowledge, and then you get paid for it, hopefully build the leadership skills, and then help others. And I think all parts of that cycle, because I learn from those that I mentor every day. I get perspectives, I learn things that I don't know. And also I found that when you teach something, you become much more able to articulate it, so you understand it better. And so I think there's benefits all around. So that's one of the things that we've talked about, doing more of that, possibly getting younger people involved earlier in their careers in this organization.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. We'll see how we can make that work. Well, it's been great to talk to you. And so, give people a sense of your background, what you're like. And so that way, folks can say, hey, this is a great guy. I'm sure that will be helping us with some of our masterclass programs, as well as the mentoring area. Patrick, thank you for taking your time out of your Vegas venue that you're working from and talking to everybody. Thanks, Patrick. Have a great day.